Every time you tap your card to buy a coffee, most people assume Mastercard is the one lending you the money. It is not. Mastercard does not give you credit. Mastercard does not pay the merchant. Mastercard does not actually hold the $5 sitting in your account. And yet, somewhere in that 2-second tap, Mastercard quietly takes a tiny slice of the transaction. Not from your pocket directly, not from the cafe directly, from the system itself. Multiply that tiny slice by tens of billions of taps, swipes, and online checkouts every year across almost every country on Earth, and you get one of the most profitable companies on the planet. A company that does not need to lend money to make money, it just needs other people's money to keep moving. So if Mastercard is not a bank, not a lender, and not really the one paying anyone, what exactly is it? And why is it so absurdly hard to replace? That is what this video is about. When people talk about powerful companies, they usually talk about Tesla, Apple, Nvidia, companies with keynote events, viral product launches, and CEOs who trend on Twitter. Mastercard is not that kind of company. Mastercard does not drop a hot new product every September. It does not have a fan base. It does not need one. And that is exactly the point. Mastercard belongs to a very specific category of business that I find genuinely fascinating, what I call boring monopolies. These are companies that sit deep inside the infrastructure of modern life, so deep that most people never think about them. You do not wake up excited about Mastercard. You do not wear a Mastercard t-shirt. You probably could not name 3 things Mastercard has done this year. But every time you buy a coffee, book a flight, pay for Netflix, or tap your phone in another country, there is a very good chance a network like Mastercard is silently processing that transaction in the background. A boring monopoly is not necessarily a monopoly in the strict legal sense. It is something subtler, a business that has positioned itself in a place where it is almost impossible to remove without breaking the system around it. And the boringness is a feature, not a bug. Boring means low drama. Boring means no consumer backlash cycles. Boring means high margins, repeat usage, and a kind of invisible dominance that almost nobody complains about because almost nobody sees it. Mastercard is one of the cleanest examples of this entire category. So to understand why, we have to look at what actually happens when you tap that card. Let's go back to that $5 cup of coffee. From your perspective, the entire transaction takes about 2 seconds. You tap, the machine beeps, you walk away, done. But behind that beep, there is a surprisingly complicated dance happening between at least 4 different parties. There is you, the card holder. There is your bank, the one that issued you the card. There is the cafe, the merchant. And there is the cafe's bank, the one that handles money coming in for the business. And then there is a 5th player sitting in the middle of all of it, Mastercard. Here is what really happens. You tap your card. The point-of-sale terminal sends a request out into the world. That request flies onto the Mastercard network, which routes it to your bank, the one that issued your card. Your bank then runs a quick series of checks. Is this card real? Is there enough money or credit available? Does this transaction look suspicious? Is someone using your card in a city you have never been to? All of that happens in milliseconds. Your bank sends back an answer, yes, approved, and that answer travels back through the Mastercard network to the cafe's terminal, which beeps, and you walk out with your coffee. The actual movement of money, the real settlement, happens later, in the background, between the banks. Notice what Mastercard is not doing here. Mastercard is not holding your money. Mastercard is not lending you anything. Mastercard is not paying the cafe. Mastercard is not even really involved in the dollars themselves. What Mastercard is doing is providing the connection, the authentication, the routing, the standards, and the trust that allows all the other parties to talk to each other, fast, securely, and at massive scale. It is, in a very literal sense, infrastructure. And once you see this picture clearly, Mastercard sitting in the middle of every tap, every swipe, every online checkout, just letting the information flow. You start to understand the next question, which is the one that really matters. How does Mastercard actually make money from this? The simplest way to think about Mastercard's business is this. It is a toll booth on a highway, and the highway is global commerce. Mastercard charges fees to the financial institutions and partners that use its network. Those fees are usually tied to the number of transactions running through, the value of those transactions, and especially whether those transactions cross borders. Cross-border transactions, like when you use your card in another country or buy something from a foreign online store, are particularly attractive because there are extra layers of fees, currency conversion, and value-added services involved. On top of that, Mastercard sells data services, fraud prevention, cybersecurity tools, analytics, and consulting to its partners. But the part that makes this business so strange and so beautiful is what Mastercard does not do. Mastercard does not really take credit risk. If you spend $1,000 on your credit card and never pay it back, the bank that issued your card eats that loss, not Mastercard. The card-issuing bank is the one that took on the risk of lending to you in the first place. Mastercard already got paid the moment your transaction went through the network. So Mastercard gets the upside of trillions of dollars in spending volume without carrying the downside of consumer defaults, recessions hitting borrowers, or loan portfolios going bad. It is quite literally a financial toll booth. The cars driving down the highway might be consumer money, business money, bank money, merchant money, dollars, euros, yen. Mastercard does not care. As long as the cars keep driving past, the toll keeps getting collected, which raises the obvious follow-up. Why has nobody just built a better highway? Here is where it gets really interesting, because the obvious thinking goes, well, it is just software, right? Some smart engineers somewhere should be able to build a faster, cheaper, prettier payment system and eat Mastercard's lunch. People have been saying this for years. It has not happened. And the reason is something that does not show up on any technical spec sheet. It is the network itself. Mastercard's real moat is not its technology. It is the two-sided web of relationships it has spent decades building. Consumers carry Mastercard cards because almost every merchant on earth accepts them. Merchants accept Mastercard cards because almost every consumer carries one. Each side reinforces the other. More cardholders means more merchants want to accept. More accepting merchants means the card becomes more useful, which means more people want to carry one. It is a flywheel that has been turning for over 50 years. To displace this network, a competitor would not just need a better app. They would need to convince hundreds of millions of consumers to carry a new payment method, millions of merchants to install new equipment to accept it, thousands of banks to issue it, regulators in every country to approve it, and an enormous web of fraud, security, and dispute infrastructure to support it, all at once. Payments is one of those rare industries where good enough, trusted enough, and accepted everywhere almost always beats newer, cheaper, and prettier. People do not want to experiment with a payment system. They want it to just work every single time. And that mindset is itself a moat. Now I want to slow down for a second because I think this is the most underrated thing about Mastercard. You can switch banks. The bank that issued your card today might not be the one you use in 5 years. Cool. Mastercard is fine with that. The cafe can change its payment terminal provider. Mastercard is fine with that too. You can shop in different countries with different currencies on different platforms. Mastercard is fine with all of it. As long as the transaction touches the network somewhere along the way, Mastercard still gets paid. Think about how unusual that is. Mastercard does not need you to love its brand. It does not need you to choose it specifically. It does not even need you to know it is there. It just needs you to live in a modern economy where money keeps moving. And the modern economy is doing exactly that, more aggressively every year. More e-commerce, more international travel, more streaming subscriptions, more cashless payments in countries that used to run on cash, more small businesses going digital, more cross-border purchases. Every one of those trends is fuel for the same fire. Mastercard does not need to win any single battle. It just needs the world to keep doing more of what it is already doing. Which leads to the bigger pattern, because Mastercard is not the only company quietly doing this. This is where Mastercard fits into a much wider playbook. A boring monopoly tends to share a few common features. First, the product is not exciting to most people. Second, it sits deep inside the infrastructure of an industry. Third, it would be enormously expensive or disruptive to replace. Fourth, it benefits from network effects or industry standards. And fifth, it makes money on volume. Small fees on huge repeating activity. Mastercard checks almost every box on that list. It does not sell a flashy experience to end users. It sells reliability, speed, global acceptance, and connectivity standards to the institutions behind the scenes. And companies like this tend to get systematically underestimated, precisely because users do not see them. We do not write love letters to the company that runs the credit card rails, or the company that supplies the chips that go into your AI servers, or the company that grades corporate bonds, or the company that makes the machines and that make the most advanced semiconductors. But these are some of the most powerful businesses in the world. They do not need attention. They need to be necessary. Mastercard is necessary. Which sets up the next question. What does the financial profile of a business like this actually look like? Building a global payment network in the first place is unbelievably expensive. You need decades of technology investment, security infrastructure, fraud detection systems, banking relationships, legal and regulatory compliance in every country, and a brand that the world trusts enough to let you sit between buyers and sellers everywhere. The upfront cost is staggering. But here is the magic. Once that network exists, the cost of running one more transaction through it is almost nothing. The infrastructure is already there. The deals are already done. The standards are already accepted. So adding another billion taps, another billion swipes, another billion online purchases does not require Mastercard to build another $1 billion of infrastructure. It just lets the same machine do more work. That is the dream profile of an infrastructure business. High fixed cost to build, low marginal cost to operate, and revenue that scales almost linearly with the activity of the entire global economy. Mastercard wins when consumers shift from cash to cards. It wins when emerging economies digitize their payments. It wins when global travel grows. It wins when e-commerce expands. It wins when businesses need to send money across borders. And every one of those trends is structurally moving in its favor over the long term. This is also why the market tends to value businesses like Mastercard the way it does. It is not pricing in a hot product cycle. It is pricing in a toll booth on global commerce. Now we get to the part that I think is the real insight of this whole story. Banks own the relationship with the customer. Merchants own the goods and services. Consumers own the decisions about what to spend money on. Mastercard does not own any of that. What Mastercard owns is something subtler and, in some ways, more powerful. It owns a piece of the shared language that lets all those parties talk to each other. In finance, trust and interoperability are everything. A payment network is not allowed to be approximately right. It has to work, almost all the time, almost everywhere, fast and securely. That standard is brutal, and it is the reason why a slick new payments app cannot just walk in and replace a system like Mastercard, no matter how good its design is. Competition in payments is not really about user interface. It is about legal relationships, fraud infrastructure, dispute resolution processes, security standards, banking partnerships, merchant acceptance, and consumer habits, all stacked on top of each other and reinforced over decades. Mastercard does not own the money, but it owns one of the most important maps that money uses to move. And whoever owns the map gets paid every time someone uses it. That is why this kind of business is so hard to compete with, and why the question of what could break it is genuinely interesting. Let's be fair, no business is invincible, and Mastercard is not a religion. There are real risks. Regulators around the world keep a close eye on transaction fees and interchange rules and could squeeze pricing. Digital wallets like Apple Pay, Google Pay, and various regional players are reshaping how people interact with payments. Some countries have built real-time bank-to-bank transfer systems that could, in theory, reduce reliance on card networks for everyday transactions. Stablecoins and blockchain-based rails are an emerging story, especially for cross-border payments, where the existing system is slow and expensive. Merchants always want lower payment costs. And payments is geopolitically sensitive infrastructure, exposed to sanctions and national policy decisions in ways most industries are not. But here's the twist. A lot of these so-called competitors do not actually replace Mastercard. They run on top of it. When you use Apple Pay, what is often happening underneath is a Mastercard or Visa transaction with a prettier interface on your phone. The logo just got hidden from your eyes. The wallet became the front end. The network is still the back end. So a real threat to Mastercard would have to do something none of these challengers have fully done yet: convince consumers, merchants, banks, and regulators all at once to adopt entirely new rails. That can happen. In some places, it is happening slowly. But the existing network is also growing, evolving, and absorbing many of these new technologies into itself. The most likely scenario is not collapse. It is mutation. So here's the takeaway. Mastercard is the cleanest possible example of a business that does not need to own the final product to capture enormous value. It does not sell coffee, plane tickets, iPhones, or Netflix subscriptions. It just sits in the middle of the payment flow for all of them. The lesson is bigger than one company. The most powerful businesses are often not where consumers are looking. Infrastructure can be more profitable than product. Networks become harder to replace the bigger they get, and a tiny fee on a repeated global behavior can quietly compound into an empire. Mastercard does not make money because money sits still. Mastercard makes money because money never stops moving, and the entire modern economy is built around making sure it never does. If you like this kind of breakdown, boring companies with terrifying power, hit subscribe, because this is exactly what the series is about. Next up, we could go into Visa, S&P Global, Moody's, ASML, or pretty much any other company that you almost never see but the entire world quietly depends on. Drop a comment with the boring monopoly you want me to break down next. Some of the most interesting businesses on Earth are the ones nobody is paying attention to. Let's go find them together.